So today I'm sitting at home and finishing up my work week and came across Lina Hidalgo's latest post on the Suppression session, where she begins to recap her perspective of what's taken place in the last special session that our Texas legislature just had. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of watch the video and kind of interject maybe a different perspective. So please join me as we go through this video together.
Terrible bills are becoming law in the state of Texas. They are taking important issues to the very extreme on the wrong end of things. They're taking this state back in time, and here's how.
So first of all, we see that her perspective is very extreme bills are taking us way back into time. That's the premise of her, the following thoughts that are about to proceed. So she's already speaking in hyperbolic language or hyperbole to try to alarm folks and get people up at arms and afraid of what's going on. So let's see where she goes.
They're encouraging intimidation of voters at the ballot box, like the days of Jim Crow.
Intimidating voters like at the ballot box, like in the days of Jim Crow. So let's just be clear here. The days of Jim Crow. So you couldn't drink at the same water fountain. White racist men in power would not even give voters, black voters, voting cards. So I just want to be straight here that she is saying that today what we're seeing, the bill that just passed, is taking us back to a time when black people could not even vote. So, okay, let's take her at her word. Let's wait to hear the evidence.
They're essentially banning abortion, like before the Roe versus Wade ruling.
So they're outlawing abortion, which that would be great if we were. I mean, let's be real here. Outlawing murder, right? Legalize murder and taking of innocent life. 55,000 preborn children in the state of Texas every year.
They're allowing pretty much anybody to carry a gun openly. No permitting, no training, just like the Wild West.
And then she goes on to say that we are not permitting the carrying of firearms. Well, of course not. We live in America where you have a constitutional right to carry a gun. The government doesn't give you the right to carry a gun. You have that right. It's in our Constitution. So you don't need a reason to carry a gun. And unless she can explain otherwise, that shouldn't be scary to Americans, because that is what is a fundamental principle of our founding as a nation.
And they're gagging teachers in how they teach about race. Like back in the day when we all had to pretend like racism wasn't a thing.
They're gagging teachers in how they talk about race. Okay, so let's get this straight. So teachers cannot talk about race, or they can't teach your children that they're racist, right? If we're honest about what we're discussing here, we're talking about critical race theory. We're talking about teaching our children, regardless of their behavior and of their merit, we're teaching them that if they are a white person, that they're inherently sinful and that they are inherently a racist. And if they are a person of color, that they are inherently a victim. And regardless of what they do, you can't change the category. So if what she's talking about is we're not allowing teachers to infuse and spur up racism within our children and pit them against one another, she's absolutely right. I don't think we want teachers teaching our children to hate their neighbor, right? Or to teach them that regardless of how they behave, that they're inherently evil or that they're inherently racist. These are terrible ideas, and that's what is against the law, and that's what the battleground is currently in the school boards and in the classrooms around the state. So if she doesn't want your child teacher telling them how they can speak about race, well, maybe that kind of discussion is not needed in the classroom. Now, if a kid shows up to class and he's a racist, that's totally different. Obviously, the behavior is not going to be, pushed aside. Any racist or hateful or violent behavior in the classroom, that's never been off the table. That's completely on the table. completely we need to address racism if it is being demonstrated in the classroom. But that is not what's being discussed.
These bills are eliminating generations of work, of fighting, of sacrifice to move our state forward. And we have to fight back.
The bills aren't moving our country back. The bills, at least the ones she's speaking of, are protecting our constitutional right to carry. It's protecting, to some degree, that I would still disagree with, babies potentially with a heartbeat. I would say that's still immoral because we should be protecting all children. 55,000 preborn children every year are being slaughtered by their mothers in the state of Texas. And then thirdly, she's talking about critical race theory and that we should be talking about how we are inherently either of the oppressor class or of the oppressed class. But we'll talk more about that later.
By passing Senate Bill 8, the law says abortion is permitted within the first 6 weeks of pregnancy. But most women don't know they're pregnant within those first 6 weeks. In 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court made abortion a right.
That's a lie. The Supreme Court doesn't make laws. I think Ms. Hidalgo needs to go back and reread the Constitution. The Supreme Court does not make laws. Laws are made by the legislative branch. There was an opinion issued by the Supreme Court in 1973, which many of us today would say was unconstitutional. When the Supreme Court exerts its authority beyond its scope, when it abuses that authority, then the states or the other branches of government should check that. And unfortunately, we have not had that branch checked. We've allowed that Supreme Court to go forward and to not only on the issue of killing innocent children, but on the issues of marriage and many other issues, we've allowed this court to effectively legislate law in the country. And that's not the way this country was founded. The laws are made in the legislature, and it is for the Supreme Court to rule on law. See, in 1973, when the Supreme Court ruled on Roe v. Wade, they said, well, the woman's right to, privacy with her doctor, well, it's not necessarily in the Constitution like black and white, but it's in the penumbra. See the shadow, not even the shadow, but the shadow of the shadow. The shadow is the umbra, and the shadow of the shadow is the penumbra. And that's where you'll find a woman's right for this, which is not in the Constitution. I'm afraid if it wasn't written, then it needs to go through the legislative branch. So that is a tactic of the left. It's a tactic of progressives to circumvent the Constitution in order to achieve their goals to write law because they know they can't get it through the legislature. But now that they've circumvented that and the state is attempting to do something and far from what it should be doing, the state should be protecting and outlawing all abortions. Anyone complicit in the murder of innocent children should be held accountable for that murder. But as she would state here, the Supreme Court made it law. No, that couldn't be further from the truth. It is not the law of the land. It may have a legal precedence, and that may be a long-standing, accepted practice in America, but that doesn't mean it's the law. We have lived and allowed it to unofficially be the law of the land. And today, we need to step up as a state of Texas and continue to assert our constitutional right as a state to protect and defend any and all preborn children within the state of Texas.
But now Texas is trying to take us back to a time of back alley abortions, to the dark ages when untold numbers of women died trying to get through botched procedures.
So now she's appealing to us because this bill is going to cause more back alley abortions. But let's get this straight. Abortion is such a pleasant word because it doesn't really describe what we're talking about here. A botched abortion, this is a botched murder, right? The mother is taking her child and looking for a paid assassin to help her kill her child. Absolutely, we don't want to make the killing of your own child more safe, right? What other area of life do we make murder easy? Where do we make it safer and cleaner? It's absurd that we would sit here and allow her to assert that a woman, because she's choosing to seek a way to kill her child and she hurts herself in the process, that we should help her kill her child as a culture and a society. Absolutely not. If a woman, I don't wish a woman would try to commit suicide. And we do things to prevent women from doing that as well, and men. I don't wish that a woman would try to go kill her child. But just because women go and do that and end up harming themselves doesn't mean we should double down and actually help them kill their children. Like, let's help the murderer be safer in the murdering of her own child. That's absurd.
House Bill 1927 passed on September 1st, and it eliminated the requirement for people to get a license in order to carry a gun openly, Wild West style. It eliminated background checks, fingerprinting, training, and pretty much means that essentially anybody can purchase a gun and carry it openly.
Yeah. What she means is anybody that's not a felon, that has their mental capacities, like any American, right? Any American can carry a firearm. Guess what? That is the law of the land. So she just asserted in the last statement what she proclaims as the law of the land, which isn't. And now she's actually trying to undermine that which is actually the law of the land. Like, you have a right to keep and bear arms, not to go hunting. We have a right to keep and bear arms to protect ourselves from totalitarian governments, where we see all over the world where governments come together and they begin to abuse. They strip away the rights of their people to have firearms, and then they begin to apply force to those cultures. We see that all over the place. All kinds of socialist and communistic regimes, basically, once you take away the guns, the next thing that's coming is your right to free speech. And when the right of free speech goes, then it's an onslaught of control and power. Our freedom is completely eradicated. These are the foundations upon which our nation has been built in order to allow for a more democratic republic that would allow us to debate ideas. See, Lina doesn't want us to debate. She doesn't want us to be able to protect our families, right? The worst thing you could do is take away people's arms and leave it to the government. If this government is evil and bad people get in power, and yet they're the very ones that get to determine whether or not you and your family get to have a weapon, how would we ever be able to defend ourselves from a bad government? As if there's never been a demonstration of bad governments in the history of the world. I mean, look around. It happens all the time. Our founders had an intended purpose for our Second Amendment right. And I have absolutely no problem with any and everyone, short of someone that is demonstrated that they're repeat violent offender, or someone that doesn't have their mental capacities about them. But beyond that, absolutely, everybody, hey, keep honest men honest. If they don't know who has the gun, they're less likely to run into a building and start shooting people up. And I think people need to take their own personal security more seriously and stop outsourcing their security to police and military and others. You are responsible for your family to protect and to provide for them.
Senate Bill 3 is a state mandate for what words come out of teachers' mouths when they teach about racism. It'll mean many teachers don't even talk about racism at all in the classroom, because they'll now be able to be fired if they don't use the kind of framing and words that the state wants them to use.
I don't think we need our children to be taught about racism in the classroom. You as a parent have the responsibility for teaching your children not to be racist. And it's not the job of teachers or the schools to teach my children moral values, how to love their neighbor. That is the job of parents. And if you happen to be a racist and you're teaching your children to be racist and they act on that racist behavior, then that's going to be condemned in the schools. Okay? No one here is saying that they embrace racism. But that's not what's up for debate. The debate is this new influence that's being seeded in our classrooms and propagated to retrain and reassert that people, based on the color of their skin, are either racist or victims, when there is a multitude of reasons why there's inequity. And America is not about equity, that all people have everything the same. No, America is about freedom and opportunity, equal opportunity to pursue a better life. It doesn't guarantee you a better life, but in no way are we going to turn around and look to the government to enforce or try to infuse within our culture equity. You know, when the government comes in and inserts itself after dividing us by telling us we're all racist and that we all need to hate each other, what the government ends up doing after the damage of critical race theory comes through and separates us and divides us into tribes, it then reasserts itself as savior and says, you know what, let big government come and save you. Okay, we're gonna raise everybody up and everybody's gonna have the same stuff. But guess what? This isn't the first time they've tried this. It happens all the time. It's happened repeatedly throughout the 20th century, 21st century. It's happening now in countries like Venezuela. And people, you know, the equity they bring is an equity of poverty, an equity of enslavement to the government, a rise in inflation, a loss of jobs, a loss of opportunity to work hard and to enjoy the fruit of your own labor. No, what critical race theory and Marxism in general teaches is that from those according to their ability to those according to their need. And what that means is that for those of us that excel at any particular area of life, while other people aren't excelling in that area, if we do something well and we get rewarded for it, the government should take our reward and evenly distribute it so that others can have what we have. And at the same time, what it doesn't account for are people who are just plain lazy or don't have opportunities. It's not the government's job to discern that. See, there are people that are in need, and I give you that. But I don't trust the government to distribute wealth. No, that's the job of communities and families to assess the needs of people within the community. If somebody is down on their luck or lost their job, or if they can't figure out, you know, how to provide for themselves, that's where we have people that are giving. We have organizations and nonprofits and ministries that help to feed people and clothe people, and job training programs to help people get back up on their feet. What we don't need to do is turn around and feed the beast, the federal beast, to turn around, collect all our money, redistribute it in a very inefficient and ineffective way, only to devalue that currency and basically inflate our currency so that it costs more to survive, further enslaving more of us. So anyway, no, critical race theory is not just about racism. It's about dividing us into tribes and separating us so that we eventually become more dependent on the government to save us and redistribute power.
It's like the time before the civil rights movement, when civil rights laws were delayed and delayed because people convinced themselves that racism was not real, that it was somebody else's problem, that we ought not talk about it so directly. We can't go back to those times.
I have no problem talking about racism, but we can't talk about theoretical racism. We have to talk about acts of racism, right? It's not. We don't deal in thought crimes here. You are a criminal if you break the law, if you physically demonstrate, if you do a behavior and act on these racist thoughts. We don't have laws that are based on thoughts. No, we want to deal with racism head on, and we need to deal with it when we see people mistreating people solely based on the color of their skin, or the family they come from, or the religion that they partake of. When we see people being mistreated because of who they are, then absolutely we need to call that out. But you can't assert that people, just because they're merely different culturally, that they cannot live together peacefully. We do that all the time, and we have been doing that. So for her to assert that that we're not allowing people to talk about racism, no, let's talk about racism, but let's talk about actual racist behavior. And let's not just stir up and instigate and try to provoke people to anger and to hate, using their imagination to think about ways somebody may be racist when they have no evidence of the sort. We need to condemn acts of racism, and I think widespread as a culture we do that, and we need to continue to do that.
On voting, the new law adds fear to the voting process. It adds a spectacle of fraud and criminality to voting. It overempowers poll watchers, lets them get as close as they deem necessary to voters as they cast their ballot. It intimidates people who assist voters with disabilities, for example. It creates severe criminal penalties for innocent mistakes that routinely happen and that are usually dealt with efficiently and quickly by local election officials. It limits voting hours, bans 24-hour voting, and drive-through voting. It is extreme.
Guys, the election laws, it couldn't be further from the truth. First, she's asserting that poll watchers are intimidating not only the voter, also intimidating the assistant helping the voter. I can tell you on the first 2 points, a poll watcher cannot even talk to a voter. But the poll watcher does have the opportunity to watch the clerks and the precinct judge and basically have a check and balance there between the various parties to assert that, or to affirm that there is a fair election going on. To say that's intimidation, she hasn't proven her point. To say that a poll watcher is doing their job, like their job is to watch. They have to be within a certain proximity in order to watch, right? To say that a person is 50 feet away behind, in a room where they can't see or hear anything, that's not a poll watcher. So the bills actually give poll watchers the ability to do what the name suggests, to actually watch what's going on. If someone is intimidating, which is a felony, if you're intimidating a voter or even talking to a voter, you can be arrested, and the precinct judge can have you escorted out of the poll. So I don't know what she's talking about. She's making up, again, hyperbole to scare people into thinking these bills are doing something that they don't do. In regards to limiting the number of voting hours, the drive-through voting, it's, first of all, we didn't have any drive-through voting prior to the 2020 election, and it came out so fast. There are some concerns with the way it's being done. Understand, there are people full-time that pick voters up and take them to get votes, and under our election law, you cannot have people assisting you in how you vote. You can't have people vote for you. That is against the law. And when we have people going through drive-through voting, or we have people voting late into the night, understand there is ample opportunity to get to the polls. There are states that have much more stringent voting laws. So to act like these are draconian laws that are basically kicking people out and not giving them any opportunity to vote, that's absurd. There are plenty of opportunities to, who needs to vote at 1 a.m. in the morning? I mean, it's not like there's one day to vote. If it was a one-day vote, then 24/7, I get it. But you're talking about like 3 weeks of early voting and then election day, and now you can vote anywhere. You don't have to vote in your own precinct. I don't know what she's talking about. Like, she's just making stuff up to scare people.
And there's a vigilante angle to all of this. They're turning back time, but they're also pitting us against each other, creating vigilantes at the ballot box, when partisan poll watchers can breathe down voters' necks as they cast their ballot.
Vigilantes at the poll box. So first of all, any candidate is afforded the right under state law to have poll watchers there. This isn't just partisan either. Like, it's literally, I mean, it is partisan, but you can have as many Republican candidate poll watchers and Democrat poll watchers at that poll as you want, and they're all expected to have a certain way that they're treating and not talking to voters and not intimidating. That is still illegal. So I don't know what she's talking about. Vigilantes, that the most of these poll watchers that she's talking about are volunteers. There's nothing, like, this is just hyperbole that she's using to evoke fear.
Vigilantes at the doctor's office. The abortion bill has a provision that says that if somebody sues a doctor for performing an abortion, that person can get $10,000. It's a bounty.
I actually agree with her on this part, but in a total opposite way. Like, why should we be arming people to go and sue when this is a murder? Like, it is not a fine to kill your children. Like, imagine fining mothers or doctors or fathers for killing their 6-month-old. This is a ridiculous proposition, but that's the law. That's what's going on, and maybe it applies pressure, but it's not vigilantism. It's trying to protect children from being murdered.
There will be vigilantes in the classroom, where a child or a parent can get a teacher fired for not using the words that the state prescribes and how to teach.
Yes, a teacher can be fired for trying to teach your children to be a racist. Yes, agreed. Or teaching your children that they are a racist just because they were born white, or teaching them that they are a victim just because they were born as a person of color.
And on top of all of this, of course, there will be the ability to carry a gun openly for pretty much anybody.
Again, you should be able to carry a gun openly and have a right to protect and defend yourself.
So what will we do about all of this? There are already individuals and groups fighting back. Organizations, including Harris County as well, filing lawsuits against the voter suppression law. Entities that are building funds to support women who need to get an abortion. And I, for one, in my office, are working hard so that in spite of the voter suppression laws, Democrats, Republicans, and anyone in between will be able to cast their ballot in elections in Harris County.
So Lina Hidalgo and her office are working very hard to spread misinformation and misrepresent what is going on. There are many people that are concerned with the election integrity in our state and across the country. I mean, not just when it comes to Republican elections. In other election cycles, there were Democrats that were that didn't care for the integrity of our or weren't confident in the integrity of our elections. When it comes to constitutional carry, it is the law of the land. Why is she trying to scare folks into thinking that people should not be allowed to exercise their constitutional right? And when it comes to protecting children, I think the law as it stands is not going to protect children the way it should. If it saves any lives, praise God. But no, I'm not going to sit here and let her pretend like we're helping women by making it easier for them to abort or kill their children. We've been doing that since 1973, and every year, year over year, we have 55,000 preborn children dying in this state, and we need to do something about it.
What you can do is continue to activate, to do your part, to make sure that we're moving toward the values that we all share. We're going to continue in the fight as well.
So what can you do? You can get involved. We need to speak back against this misinformation. We need to start learning what kind of bills are being ran. We need to understand what our local politicians are doing. We need to impact elections and get leaders elected that are going to be honest. And when they lie, we need to hold them accountable. And the best way to hold them accountable is to show up and vote. Show up and vote on your school board election. Show up and vote for your local and state reps who are going to be writing the laws in this land. Lina Hidalgo is here trying to scare her base and others who would hear into thinking that such terrible things are going on in the Texas legislature, when in reality what's going on is we're trying to add better integrity to elections so that one person gets one vote. We're trying to make sure people get to exercise their constitutional right to carry and bear arms, and we're trying to protect preborn children in the state of Texas. And yes, we're not going to sit here and believe the lie that women have a right and choice to kill their own children. That's not what we're not going to continue to pretend. They want a right to choose what to do with their own body. That's fine, but they got to understand there is a body inside of their body, and they don't have a right to kill their own children. So ask yourself, what can you do? Do you need to be going to school board meetings? Do you need to be paying attention to the commissioner's court? Do you need to get active in your local party and influence that party towards your values? I would encourage you, figure out who your elected officials are and ask how are they voting and what are they voting for. They work for you, and they get away with doing a whole lot of things that you would not believe. And my encouragement to you today is to get active, don't continue to believe the lies, get informed, and we'll see you at the ballot box.